Hola, good afternoon, tardes, bonjour, boa tarde. Welcome to this session that is the Vision 2021-2030 of the Culture 2030 Goal Campaign. My name is Gloria Pérez Salmerón. Working at Diputació de Barcelona, Barcelona Provincial Council, at the International Relationships Directorate. And I have the pleasure to join this panel today as facilitator. The Culture 2030 Goal Campaign is a coalition of global cultural networks united to advocate for the role of culture in sustainable development. The story of the campaign began when the members of the coalition united their efforts in 2013 to launch a global campaign entitled Culture 2015 Goal. Its main goal was to do an effective goal of action to include culture in what would become transforming our world, the 2030 agenda of the United Nations. And adopted by, United Nations at the General Assembly in September 2015. With the implementation of the 2013 agenda underway, the campaign evolved into Culture 2030 Goal. This session is devoted to introduce the members and the strategy of the Culture 2030 Goal campaign, and our guests are invited to explain how their wish cultural policies are more robust in the global conversation on development. Imagine how a cultural goal could be in the post-2030 development agenda and working to suggest possible outcomes of the Mondial Club Plus 40 conference to take place in 2022. Our prominent speakers today are Gerald Leina, Secretary General of the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions, IFLA. He's here with us in the room. Pierre Clavier, Ernest Cámara. Mabiala, that is the President of Arterial Network. He's also online. Celia Fischer, Secretary General of the International Music Council. She's also here with us in the room. Nathalie Gue, Secretary General of International Federation of Coalitions for Cultural Diversity. She's as well online. Gabriel Caballero, focal point of the SDGs ICOMOS, International Council of Monuments and Sites. And finally, Catherine Collin, a special advisor of CLG Cultural Committee. Let's get started because you know that we have a very short time for our session. And we will do 2 rounds of questions, but I will ask to the members that the speakers they are online, 2 questions in a row, just because of the connections. I guess you understand that it's better to have just one connection with them. So let's get started with my first question is to Gerald Leina, IFLA Secretary General. Gerald, the floor is yours, but first I'm launching you the question. How does IFLA, the International Federation of Library Associations, help to articulate the integration of libraries in both short-term recovery and long-term sustainable development strategies?
Thank you, Gloria. And first of all, thanks to the organizers and to the city of Izmir for this kind invitation, and most of all that you're bringing us here all together to talk about culture and to bring culture on the agenda. Welcome all to the participants here. Some words to IFLA. IFLA is the global voice of libraries. This means we representing libraries from more than 150 countries in the world, millions of libraries. We advocate for libraries and we develop libraries. To your question, Gloria, libraries have arguably been about supporting sustainable development from the institutions of antiquity that enabled the survival and development of human thought and knowledge to today's public libraries working through culture to promote education, social cohesion, and civic engagement. Drawing on this enormous experience, IFA therefore places a very strong emphasis on the need to integrate libraries both into recovery and development strategies. This is because we know through our experience how broad, how rich the contribution is that our institutions can make. We know how much of a missed opportunity it is when the possibility to work through libraries is not recognized, is not exploited. We know how much further public health policy can reach if they use libraries for sharing materials, for consultation, for access to telehealth. We know how much education is supported when the skills and passion of libraries and librarians serves to complement formal learning. We know how vital the public space and materials that libraries offer can be to making a reality of democracy and participatory government. We argue, therefore, that libraries and the culture sector as a whole, of course, should therefore be the right from the beginning of the policy-making process, so we do not miss any of these opportunities. And this is extremely important. Culture is not an added value. When we're talking about actions, at the beginning of actions are always ideas. And this is clear and logical that culture has the place there from the very beginning, and it's a missed opportunity to bring culture in at the end to make it a bit nicer also. That's not the idea of making it really a better community, a better society. Through sharing insights based on deep knowledge of community needs, through ensuring that the power of culture and access to information for all is recognized as a means of achieving change, through integration of our spaces and institutions into implementation plans, it's absolutely necessary to be there at the beginning of the planning. This is one of the great strengths of the Culture 2030 goal campaign, the possibility to work together to share examples of what can be gained when libraries and cultures are integrated, while also calling for a change of perspective in the key frameworks that share development policies as a whole. Through this, we both give libraries and other cultural actors on the ground the tools for effective advocacy, and at the global level work to ensure that culture and libraries are seen as essential to development policy making in the short and long term. This is why we are so much interested to work together with you and to bring in the experience of libraries to the better of our societies.
Thank you, Gerald. I would like now to connect with Ines Camara, President of Cultural Action. She's online. Can we listen to her?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, I'm very happy to be here with you. I don't know if you're hearing me well.
We can hear you, but we cannot see you now. But I guess you can see us.
I do, I can see you.
Okay, great. So I will start with your question. Okay, here you are. Hello,
Hi.
Linda. Ines, how is Culture Action Europe driving progress across the UN Agenda 2030?
Well, that can be a difficult question, right? It's very, very wide, but thank you for the question. So I think that our action is closely related with the nature of Culture Action Europe. And of course, we're a cross-sectoral network with, at this point, with 180 members that are also networks in themselves. And we think that the main goal of the campaign 2030 and all our recent endeavors has been related with the idea of recognizing culture as a main driver for sustainable development. And we are seeing this in a very, very wide scope, because we think that we have to discuss the intervention of the artistic and cultural community in 3 different levels. First, And that's important thing in these difficult times, that we're not only discussing the recovery of post-COVID, but we are also discussing our relation with each other and our own heritages. We think that culture is a very, very important agent for what we could call technologies of memory and identity. And we are, in fact, discussing the past and past representations as a complex, as a dynamic reality. And we don't want to say that when we're talking about heritage or art or culture, we're talking about a consolidated or monolithic interpretation. It's really about this idea of continuity, of discussing that kind of subjects when we're looking at a common future and to its challenges. So it's more about this idea of embracing complexity and embracing a common heritage, a common ground that can lead us to a common future. And that's a very important thing that we bring in as cultural agents. The other thing, it has to do with the way that as cultural agents, and I think that's a very important part of our work, and sometimes when we're so embroiled in these discussions about social development and even about city planning, we forget about that, because public art, public initiatives are also an important part of that, is that artists and cultural programmers have the talent, and we're really talking about talent and artistic vision and artistic research, to put all of us in difficult places. That's the place of the avant-garde movement, that's a place of discussion, difficult subjects. And that also gives us, again, a common future, right? Because they give us glimpses of what we can have. They give us the possibles, many times beyond what we are perceiving as our daily challenges. And finally, the third vector that I want to talk, and it's very, very important for Culture Action Europe, and it has been a big part of our work in 2021, besides the campaign 2030, is our involvement in the Porto Santo Charter. That is a document that was developed in the Portuguese presidency of the EU. And it's about cultural democracy. It's about this idea that when we're talking about cultural activities, when we're talking about arts, we're giving a challenge to everybody, but we're also giving them an opportunity to participate. We're recognizing different voices. And through that, we're offering more participation and basically more democracy, because it goes beyond the limits of representative democracy, as we live in most of our states, and it gives the step further, that's about participating, being there in mind and also in the creative part. And that is closely linked to our work with the Portuguese presidency in the Porto Santo Charter. It's about cultural democracy, it's about opening the institutions, and it is also about well-living, because it's beyond well-being. It's about well-living, it's about a whole. And that's the main motor of sustainable development.
You are right, well-living. Now my second question, Ines. What is your assessment of the initiatives that the campaign has led so far, as you have seen?
We are very, very excited with the campaign, because one of the things that it has shown is that, albeit these horrible circumstances that the pandemics brought to all of us, the cultural sector is thriving. It's alive, it's not well, but it's recovering. And most of all, I think there's a huge hope from the people to continue to do things, and they're looking at the future. So we've had a lot of great contributions to the campaign. We've produced some very interesting documents. And one of the things that's very important in this idea of producing or making the campaign going forward, and that we have recognized in the last times, it's about it being part of a network of documents and thought and actions that seem to be like a tide of change and innovation. And in these so difficult times that we're talking about survival, it's very, very good for us. It's a very optimistical sign to have these glimpses of innovation. People are still willing to learn and to go forward. And the campaign has had a huge adhesion. And we're looking forward for the next 2 or 3 years of consolidation of those goals.
Great to hear this, that also the pandemic time has learned us a lot of things to survival and also to create. So, muito obrigada, Inés.
Obrigada eu.
Big
Thank you.
Tanat, if there's any question at the end to you, okay? So let's connect now with our third speaker that is also online, Monsieur Pierre Clavé. Pierre? Can you hear us?
Bonjour.
Bonjour, Pierre.
Oui, je vous entends très bien, merci. J'espère que je me fais entendre moi aussi.
Thank you. I can hear you very well, and I hope you can hear me as well. Thank you very much. First of all,
est un réseau panafricain de la société civile du secteur de la culture. Il est composé d'artistes.
the Arterial is a Pan-African network, and the activists, investors, and artists are what it's made of. And there are 5 regions in Africa, and we have many members from all these areas, and we take part in the artistic side. This is, of course, important that we take part and cooperate with these artists. It is important to maintain a sustainable development and sustainable urbanization. Of course, this can only be improved with national networks, and lobbying is also necessary in both the country and the areas. And we need. It's mentioned that as the borders are vanished and bigger projects are requested, and we don't care about geographical borders. Arterial is also important for knowledge sharing and documentation sharing. And when we look at it socially, artists can do things that they aim for, and they can improve around culture and art and develop. Of course, we make discussions here, and one of our goals is to aim for sustainable development in the national and local scope. Of course, the African culture values are spread with this network. At the same time, the lifestyle and the well-being of the artists are our priority. We do some projects and we try to achieve certain results. I want to talk about 2 example projects in a few words. In the introduction of the culture atelier we have a project we call Africa, and we talk about the rights of the artists. We teach them what rights they have, and we try to create an awareness for all sides. With these programs, we make sure that the art and the artists can express themselves. Of course, the culture has a social side, and we put this forward, and this way we can share the same perspective with the world. And our second project is Creative African City. This is a model for us that we have developed in the Arterial, and we put expression to our center, the expression we have in cities, and we look at local policies, and we create culture policies. And what's interesting here is that when we look at the foundation, culture and these cultural policies are made, they stem from the public, and they go towards an international, universal path. And with the same initiative, with the same perspective, we are trying to implement these nationwide. Of course, we couldn't get a lot of positive feedback for these programs, and with this new vision, new artists can work together and they can aim to have a new vision, and we are implementing this program to create improvement and include all our citizens. And this program is very nice because it creates integration, it includes culture in the policies, and this Creative City program is creating a cooperation between actors and the cities, and therefore it becomes a successful model that can be an example to others. We don't have a lot of time, that's why I could only talk about these two examples about what Artelier is doing. Thank you very much. What is the best contribution Artelier Network does? I want to state that we joined this campaign, and it was a very difficult time for us. I can say this because of the pandemic. And when we look at the actors, we needed to strengthen them, and we needed their participation in the network. And while we had a lot of negative situation going on with the pandemic, and it was an extreme situation, and in a way, it became an opportunity to take advantage from this campaign, and for Africa, it created an opportunity for us to make a global implementation, and we tried to take a look at where we can position ourselves in the world as Africa. And we took part in this, and we said to our members that we're not alone in this fight. We could say this because there was a global global action, and we determined the place Africa holds, and this is very important for us, and we will continue to promote this. Thank you very much.
Music Council, Celia Fesha. Celia, what are the present and the future projects of the International Music Council regarding the role of music in the achievements of the SDGs in the decade of action ahead?
Thank you very much, Gloria, and thank you very much also to Uclg and the city of Izmir for giving us all the opportunity to share and to learn from colleagues, including colleagues from local government. It's been very exciting days so far, so thank you very much for this opportunity. The International Music Council strives for a world where everyone can learn, experience, create, perform and express oneself through music, and where musical artists enjoy recognition and receive a fair remuneration for their work. These values are embedded in our 5 music rights. At IMC, we recognize music's multiple purposes in our society, whether as an art form, a product, or a tool. In all its work, IMC embraces the intrinsic value of music, which enriches and inspires those who engage in it. Under this vision, IMC has set out on multiple activities in terms of both advocacy and projects to fortify music's role as a catalyst of sustainable development, and also help reform the music sector towards more sustainable practices. The project SHIFT, Shared Initiatives for Training, seeks to build capacities in the culture sector to better address climate change, UN SDG 13, gender equality, SDG 5, and inclusion of minorities, SDG 10. IMC and its partners have been producing training manuals, toolkits, webinars. We have just now released an amazing annotated bibliography. Yes, and bibliography can be amazing, with 110 resources to help cultural leaders engage with the topic of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Here at the Culture Summit in Izmir, we have just finished a session on gender equality, and in this context I would like to mention another project which we did last year, as we couldn't organize our annual International Rostrum of Composers, which promotes contemporary music creation. We asked our participating radios to dig into their archives and to retrieve hidden treasures, meaning works composed by female composers and which have never made it really to the radar. And we broadcast those hidden treasures then on the internet, making them available to as many as possible. The IMC's regional group for Europe, the European Music Council, has been using its annual forum to increase awareness about the sustainability agenda. Under the heading Climate Action, Music as a Driver for Change, the 2020 forum consisted of important discussions with musical artists, policymakers, and environmental experts on how music activities can contribute to the protection of our environment. The 2021 edition of the forum saw panels of musicians and policymakers and other representatives of the cultural sector discussing the role of music in energizing our society towards the SDGs. That's when we presented the Culture 2030 Goal campaign and showcased two major toolkits on music and the SDGs: Music as a Global Resource and Your Guide to Music and the SDGs, which was presented yesterday here at Izmir. Moreover, IMC has entered into diverse partnerships for a fair and sustainable music ecosystem. For example, with the Swedish company Uclg AB to support fairer conditions in the music gig sector. Or very recently, with the Global Music Vault, which uses innovative, future-proof and timeless storage technologies to preserve music capsules in a place similar to the Global Seed Vault, also known as the Doomsday Vault. And to close the circle opened with gender equality, we currently partner with our member Jeunesse Musicale International to achieve gender mainstreaming in the youth and music sector. The project Play It Loud welcomes underrepresented youth to express themselves freely through music, of course, to take ownership and to participate actively in local and national democratic and civic spaces, thus contributing to shaping a more inclusive society. We strongly believe in strategic collaborations for efficient advocacy. Since January 2020, IMC has been a member of the Climate Heritage Network, which was presented yesterday here at the summit. We have also been active in the steering committee of the Global CSO Coordination in the framework of the UNESCO 2005 Convention. And in collaboration with our regional group, we have contributed to the structured dialogue at EU level on culture and the SDGs. We have also joined forces with other organizations active in the field of culture and development to put culture at the radar of the European Development Days. And for the coming years of the Action Decade, we will focus on working with our 130 network members and their affiliated 1,000 organizations which operate in 150 countries to use the tools developed so far, among others by the SHIFT project, and to help our community harness the potential of music to galvanize the transition to a sustainable society. Thank you.
Thank you, Celine. A lot of work done and still much to do. I would like to ask to Nathalie Gay, that she is the Secretary General of International Federation of Coalitions for Cultural Diversity. Nathalie, are you?
Oui, je suis là. Bonjour.
Great.
Merhaba herkese.
My first question to you is, what are the challenges identified by the International Federation of Coalitions for Cultural Diversity in ensuring, protecting, and promoting the diversity of cultural expressions in the post-COVID time?
Les défis sont très nombreux. Je ne savais pas qu'on allait aller nécessairement dans cette direction-là, mais je pense que ça va me permettre quand même un peu de présenter la fédération et ensuite de faire le lien aussi avec la campagne 2030. D'ailleurs, j'étais sur un panel hier où on discutait des impacts de la COVID sur essentiellement les artistes, les créateurs, le secteur culturel aussi dans son ensemble. Et donc, je pense que cette campagne-là a une grande contribution à apporter à toutes les organisations et toutes les personnes qui, comme la Fédération internationale des coalitions pour la diversité
And this campaign makes a big contribution, especially in terms of diversity. Of course, we are trying to bring a new light to this subject, into this dark area that we're facing, and maybe we should state this for those who don't know us a lot. There is a convention, the UNESCO convention, and here we're talking about cultural diversity in a national and international level, and our organizations are based on certain cultural policies, so that we can create these policies with the incentives from the government, so that we can support artists and promote and preserve culture. This is our main subject in our discussions, and after this period, of course, this digital, environmental friendly path is being followed, and we are trying to make sure we have correct legislations. All we express are expressed online here, so we need to talk about rights, we need to talk about human rights and freedom of art. And of course, we also support UNESCO with our work. And we are discussing subjects that are closely related to public, and this campaign is supportive of our campaign. And we think that culture is the fourth pillar, and we try to prove this aspect. And this way, our work axis is around the fact that culture preservation is very important, because culturally, these digital environment shows that preserving the culture is a priority, and also acknowledge culture as the fourth pillar. Of course, culture has a contribution to sustainable development, and the cultural sector is also affected by it. And in the agenda, the place of culture must exist. And as Ines has talked about before, we are creating a network, and culture is something that inspires us, and it helps us stay together, it helps us cooperate. And at the end of the day, when we look at the periods that we're going through, it also helps us psychologically. Of course, it has many other dimensions that we can talk about, but first we need to acknowledge that the culture sector must be placed in the agenda, and institutions like us should be included in the studies and works being done. And in order to achieve these other goals in the sustainable development, we need to be included. And of course, when we look at the cultural sector and creating our goals, we mustn't forget the role of culture, especially in this time. When we look at all the effects and how COVID is affecting artists, for example, more than 40% of the artists gone through depression through the pandemic. There have been suicides. Even yesterday, there was a case in Montreal, and more than 2 million people lost their jobs who have been working in the culture sector. Therefore, many people who worked by themselves are right now unemployment, and this is a loss of richness for us, for diversity. And we need to pay close attention to culture. We need to pay importance to it, and in order to keep the sector alive, we need to take action, and we need to contribute to this area. Thank you very much, Natalie.
For the post-COVID era, because now it's different as it was at the beginning of the campaign. What do you think are the challenges that we will have next month?
Bien, en fait, je pense que c'est de continuer à en fait, de devenir de rester un lieu où les gens vont pouvoir mettre de l'énergie et contribuer et continuer à construire cette campagne-là. C'est pas toujours évident de faire une campagne mondiale. Donc, évidemment, on l'a mis en place.
It's not possible to make an international campaign. We are trying to do a local campaign with the opportunities that we have. We have a big support, but as you know, there are different action subjects, and there are different international associations and institutions. And in we have emergencies that we need to take care of as well, but we shouldn't steer away from our goals, and UCLG has been helping us greatly in this aspect so that we can continue our work, and all the other institutions also helped us, but following this rhythm, keeping up with it is also important, but the real challenge will be the next step, I think. But culture right now is still a subject that we are working on, and it needs to become the fourth pillar, and we need to acknowledge it so that we can realize our 2030 goals. Of course, we also have sub-goals in certain sectors, but when we look at 2030, you mustn't forget that we can't miss this opportunity, we can't miss this date, and people must realize that local relations, national relations, and even international relations, individuals, institutions are slowly creating actions in the area of culture, and we need to go and see this on the ground and share tangible results. And after the era that will come after 2030, we need to be prepared for this. Thank you, Natalie.
Caballero, Gabe, are you there?
Yes, yes, I'm here. Yeah.
Hello, welcome. My question to you as a focal point of this disease ICOMOS is the following. How is ICOMOS engaging development actors and raising awareness of the potential contribution of heritage practices to sustainable development processes?
Thank you very much. Before I begin, I would just like to say thank you very much for UCLG and Izmir Metropolitan Municipality for organizing the event. ICOMOS is a non-governmental, non-profit or international organization that furthers the conservation, protection, use, and enhancement of the world's cultural heritage. We have 10,500 members, and then we have 131 countries that works through 29 international scientific committees. Now, with regards to your question in terms of how do we engage with local actors, our national committees are very much in control of many of the activities that are happening nationally. The SDGs working group, for example, we collate or come together to discuss with our national committee members, and we engage with them and then give them tools so that they can engage with their local governments. And I think the beauty of what happened yesterday with the signing of the MOU between UCLG and ICOMOS is that we are more empowered to do that now, that we have a direct link with our collaborators of local government officials and heritage practitioners to come together and resolve issues not just about cultural heritage, but also looking at culture as a driver of sustainable development. You know, ICOMOS has been part of the Culture 2030 agenda since 2014, and the target 11.4 has been put in as a target for the SDGs. So that's included in the agenda, which highlights the role of cultural heritage in the SDGs. And I think that the ICOMOS is in a very good position to influence what can be done on the ground. We also engaged with UNESCO in different manners, and particularly in the World Heritage. And that is providing the benefit nationally and also internationally for the work of cultural heritage experts. Now, I want to highlight one point, which was highlighted by our colleague Andrew Potts yesterday, which is really the work that we should all do is going beyond cultural heritage or cultural practice, but also looking at how climate change will affect all our lives. COVID has affected our lives now, and you've asked that question to all our colleagues here. But I think the major thing that will hinder the growth of the cultural sector is really the things that are happening outside and beyond the environmental aspects, which we all have to bond together and really think about how cultural actors can support climate action. Thank you.
Thank you. And what should be the engagement of the campaign with the Mondial Plus Club Plus 40 conference? What do you think should be the engagement?
So leading from what I said earlier, I really think that the Mondial Plus 40 conference, we have already recognized, at least for ICOMOS, that the cultural heritage is in a state of climate emergency. And as a society, we have already crossed those safe boundaries of the planet. So business as usual is no longer the option, as what Andrew has said yesterday. We've already recognized that climate change will affect the successful implementation of the SDGs. And we need to bring that to that conference. The world is failing to meet the Paris targets, and the adverse impacts of climate change for cultural heritage sites are also being felt. Culture and cultural heritage have the potential to enable inclusive, transformative, and just climate action. And we urge the campaign members and everyone here to help us safeguard culture, cultural expressions, cultural heritage from adverse climate impacts, deliver resilient, sustainable development, and recognize equity and justice as part of cultural policies for the future. So I do hope that we discuss that for next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Gavin. Thank you for your words and clear position about the next steps. So next speaker is here with us, is Catherine Collin. She is a special advisor of Uclg Culture Committee, And of course, she knows a lot of things about this campaign, and I would like to ask you, Catherine, about the trajectory, the course of the Uclg committed and advocate in this advocate role of this campaign.
Thank you, Gloria. Hello, everyone. In 2013, as the then president of the Uclg Culture Committee, I gave a short speech at the United Nations pleading for the inclusion of a standalone goal on culture. As I concluded, the facilitator of the session said, "Oh, bringing culture into the SDGs, how original." And a few members of the audience laughed. Well, here we are some 8 years later, stronger and more numerous and vocal to have the importance of culture recognized as the highest international levels. Just as a reminder, the 2015 Culture Gold campaign was the first time ever that all these federations that we have just heard and others worked together to plead a cause, the inclusion of a goal on culture in the upcoming 2015 agenda. And it is great to see us still standing together, more and more confident in our purpose, although we still have not been fully understood or heard at the national levels and sometimes at the local ones too. The SDGs sailed through in 2015 with no standalone goal on culture, although the Uclg had joined all the available forces through a task force to obtain a standalone goal on cities and informal settlements, Goal 11, where we knew the topic of culture would be taken seriously, the Uclg having always supported culture as an essential factor in sustainable development. But still, the cultural world was rightly disappointed. Much work has been done since. The cultural sector, with its worldwide networks, has been hyperactive, as you have just been hearing from the speakers. The fact that culture is everywhere in the SDGs, but is mentioned almost nowhere, is being highlighted by the countless examples of cultural practices being collected in response to the UN request to localize the SDGs, i.e., find local examples of how they're being implemented. And the result is stunning. Culture and cultural practices and innovations are indeed everywhere and to be found throughout the 17 SDGs. Thus, the campaign today is very different because we are better armed to face skepticism on the real role of culture, with facts, with examples, with research, with tireless advocacy. When we first started to talk in the early 2000s about culture as the fourth pillar of sustainable development, we were met with some sarcasms at the best. Also with enthusiasm, I must add. Why do you want culture to be the fourth pillar of sustainable development? Culture is everywhere. Our answer? By saying culture is everywhere without specifically recognizing it, culture will be nowhere. Today, culture is widely accepted as the fourth dimension of sustainable development. Economic viability, social equity, environmental responsibility, cultural vitality. And this, to me, is very encouraging for our present advocacy. We are at a turning point in the inclusion of culture in the next phase of the SDGs. Indeed, the world's challenges are too important not to give an equal amount of attention to it, as no development can be sustainable without including culture in a serious way. And I think we have just heard lots of examples of this through the different federations. And as Andrew Potts of ICOMOS said yesterday, the world needs culture. We must keep the momentum, bring new partners and voices on board. We have a few years to forge ahead with great examples, organizational commitments, academic research, civil society involvement, artistic and cultural activists. They don't need us to tell them to do it, they do it anyway, but they need our support. And in this plea for a goal on culture in the 2030 agenda, as Nathalie Gay just said, on ne peut pas manquer 2030. We cannot miss 2030. And all of us, we must continue to convince, convince, and convince. Thank you.
Thank you. Here we go. This enthusiastic message of Catherine. So let's go to the second round of the questions for our speakers that we have here in the room. And I will start, Gerald. Why is it relevant for your organization, that is IFLA, the International Federation of Library Associations, to be part of the Culture 2030 Goal campaign?
I guess the answer is very simple. No one of us alone will reach the best results for culture and for the people we serve, and therefore we have to work together to the best results that we have heard already from several speakers, and this is also the aim and goal of IFLA. Libraries are naturally cooperative institutions. We are used to sharing and collaborating in order to fulfill our missions, and of course we are ready to do the same when it comes to advocating. And it's also clear that barriers are falling, not just between access to and production of culture, but also between different forms of culture. Libraries are both a place to read and a place to create, increasingly working with a wider variety of forms of art in order to achieve our missions. It simply makes sense, therefore, for us to work with our partners in the campaign, given that we have a shared interest in seeing culture recognized, supported, and promoted in development strategies. This also clearly helps, given that getting a culture goal in the post-2030 agenda is a major challenge and something best done together and not alone. This applies as much at the global levels as at the national and local, where there is so much potential to build alliances and coalitions to make the case for making culture central to development strategies. We also have so many examples to share, including of partnerships between libraries and other cultural actors, which strengthens our advocacy. I should also underline a key characteristic of the campaign. It also has been particularly important to bring together a group of international cultural networks, each with the power and legitimacy that membership networks bring with them. This allows us to focus on the long term. Now, with our vision and strategy, we have a launchpad for work over the next 9 years to really make culture central to development frameworks. IFLA and the libraries are ready to do it with you, and we are eager to start and continue the work with you with all our energy and power. Thank you for the invitation again to Uclg, and I really have great expectation in the networks we are creating. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gerald. Celia, what are the vision and strategy of the
Well, as Catherine just said, we're still standing together, strong differently, but we're standing together, and we will be standing together until we achieve our goal, and that is the Culture 2030 goal in the next development agenda. So in April 2020, the members of our campaign released the Culture COVID-19 statement, which was entitled Ensuring Culture Fulfills Its Potential in Responding to the COVID-19 Pandemic. This statement not only highlighted the need to support culture during the pandemic, but also on how culture could both promote well-being or well-living, as we just also heard, in the immediate term, and a stronger, a fairer recovery in the longer term. For our statement, we received really noteworthy attention from various organizations, including UNESCO and the WHO, and also culminating in an endorsement by the President of the UN General Assembly. Within the context of the UN Decade of Action, less than 10 years left, just as a reminder, we have initiated the development of a strategic framework for our campaign in order to make sure that the recognition of culture as fourth pillar of sustainable development is embracing the whole world, is being embraced by the whole world at global level, both by decision makers at the highest international level, but also by the population, the world's population. We envision all to embrace our vision and to recognize that, as was said, the world needs culture. Our values and beliefs haven't changed with our new strategic direction. They are rooted in the Culture 2015 goal campaign manifesto, which we issued in 2014. And also, of course, I just mentioned the COVID-19 statement. Our goals for the next 10 years include a stronger place for culture throughout the implementation of the current Global Development Agenda, the UN 2030 Agenda, and, of course, the adoption of culture as a distinct goal in the post-2030 Development Agenda. Nathalie was referring to the challenge of finding our place among the competing, let's face it, priorities. But this is our goal, a distinct goal in the post-2030 agenda, and also the adoption of a global agenda for culture. Among the activities we foresee for the next 10 years, I would like to mention to engage at UN high-level political fora and other relevant global intergovernmental events, notably through the organization of high-level panels. And I would like to mention in this perspective that on 7th of July, a few members of our campaign organized a high-level panel during the last UN high-level political forum entitled Partnering Through Culture, Heritage and the Art for Resilient and Inclusive Recovery. Another activity for us will be to support advocacy at the national and regional levels in favor of incorporating culture into development planning through the sharing of tools and information. Thirdly, to develop and implement methodologies for monitoring and engaging voluntary national and local reviews, including through shadow reporting, in order to maximize, once again, the recognition of culture. And yesterday we had the presentation by Ege Yildirim on first conclusions of her analysis of a series of voluntary local reports. A fourth activity will be to influence and to shape the discourse through the issuing of statements and other reports, including to look at what a culture goal could actually look like, mentioning of access, of diversity, tangible and intangible heritage, mentioning of cultural rights, of course. And last but not least, to build connections, strong connections with diverse other stakeholders and to bring campaigns together. We embrace the concept of localizing the SDGs, Catherine mentioned this too, and we really work in the spirit of cross-sector collaboration and wish to extend to all other kinds of stakeholders and beyond governments and UN agencies. And to this end, we have made an appeal to join the campaign, to everyone who wishes, who shares our vision, who shares our objectives, and to want to join our efforts to make the Culture 2030 Goal campaign a success. Thank you.
Thank you, Celia. This is very much linked with my last question, that is for Catherine. It's about how to be involved, how culture sector, culture actors, we can be involved in this campaign.
Well, I think Celia has just said it, but first of all, I want to say we need all the voices, all the cultural activists, all the energies that we can get. We must really be as many as we can claiming for a standalone goal in 2030 on culture. As you just said, Celia, the voluntary local reviews are a way of adding examples of cultural practices that have to do with the SDGs that are concerned. And this adds to our sort of bibliography of practices, which is a real help in trying to convince, because we're starting to collect them, and we have more and more, but the more we get, we don't know them all, of course, and so if they come from civil society, from cultural activists, from cultural teams, this will just make our arguments stronger. And I think the way to go about it, now that you have heard quite a few of the federations, of the cultural federations, if you are into libraries and books, you should get a hold of the of IFLA, the ICM for music, Arterial if you're in Africa, etc., etc. I think you can, just add to the voices of these federations, which then work as a global network. And of course, last but not least, you can always contact the UCLG, the Cultural Committee. The coordinator is Jordi Pasquale, but you will find it easily online.
Thank you. We have very few minutes for questions, and I guess that we have, Elle, you want to ask something? Please go to a microphone.
Thank you very much. Thanks to Celia for recognizing our report, which we presented yesterday. I'm Ege Yildirim. I'm also a member of ICOMOS and representing ICOMOS on the Culture 2030 Goal campaign, sometimes with our fellow colleagues. And they've already said many important points, but I wanted to make sure everybody is aware that there are some very specific actions you can take in this room, in the online Zoom forums, today or tomorrow, very easy steps. Sometimes we don't know the entry points, we have very big, broad ideas. And sometimes what we need are very simple and easy steps to get going and start a process. And I think one of them is, please go to the link, culture2030goal.net, and please sign our statement, Culture COVID-19 Statement. We have several hundred individuals and organizations, but we are aiming for much more. So please, that's a very easy thing to do. You can also sign an MOU and join the Climate Heritage Network, climateheritage.org. The campaign is partnering with the Climate Heritage Network as well. And in this summit, you've heard of various tools. The VLRs, the local government reports, are one tool that we are talking about. The local government reports to the implementation of the SDGs, and how actually culture actors can go to their local decision makers and start a conversation. As cultural actors, we care about sustainability, we care about climate, you need us, we can contribute. And in some countries and cities, there are SDG coalitions, 2030 coalitions, and in some cities we see that the culture department starts this process. So there are easy steps we can all take, and sometimes we get confused where to start, but whatever draws you and is easy, please just go ahead and do it and join us. And I think in the long run, we will all be part of the Culture 2030 goal campaign eventually. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. There's any other question? The floor is open. You can ask whatever you want. Go ahead.
My question is for Catherine. You mentioned about your effort for offering the culture as a fourth pillar for the sustainable development. For me and some more other theoreticians, sustainability only consists of two pillars, I guess, because nature and culture generally consists all of these concepts. We can consider economy and social dimension under culture. I'm suggesting that because when we talk about culture as a fourth pillar, we can sometimes confuse about the position of where is the cultural industries, where is the cultural economy, or the impact of the negative impacts of the culture on the nature or environmental impact. So maybe we can summarize our cognition and perspective, how we perceive the anthropocentric visions over culture through the nature. I think this is more honest approach to find out where we are and what we are going to do. I'm just referring to the, for example, the David Vaughan's deep design mentality, nature, culture, and negotiation between these. So I want to hear your ideas about this. Thank you.
I mean, you are raising a huge subject. Okay, what is the limits of culture, nature, etc.? I mean, the important thing for us who are, cultural activists, managers, artists, somewhere on the ground, I want to say, is to be part of the discussion. We didn't invent the discussion. We came at a moment where there were three pillars, and they're no longer called pillars, they're called dimensions. Okay, because you can understand why, because pillars would mean you would still be doing these silo effects, having this silo effect. So we arrived, and our point is, we can discuss actually for weeks. Is it a square? Is it a round? Is it a dimension? Are there two? Are there five? Are there seven? The important thing for us is to be up there equally with the others. I don't care what they call them, and I can leave, I mean, it's not my discussion, I can leave a discussion for people who are very enthusiastic about it, but I know that culture has to be at the same level, the same point as the other subjects which we did not invent.
Thank you. Thank you for the question and the answer. Is any other question? So if not, we are going really to conclude this session. It was very interesting. We have heard how difficult and unsuccessful in a way it was to have culture in the 2030 agenda. But as Catherine said, and we all know, world needs culture. And culture has our involvement of our organizations, ourselves, our federations, and we saw here, because culture is absolutely the fourth pillar of development. So let's work together in alliance under this campaign, and get the best for next UN agenda. Thank you very much.